Gravediggers Union, written by me, drawn by the amazing Toby Cypress. Available on Amazon and at comic shops to order right now, books 1 and 2. And of course, Deadly Class. I'm the artist, Rick Remender is the writer. Books 1 to 12 available at comic shops, bookstores, etc. I feel like the musical background of this YouTube show is my dog barking at people at the door. Something you can hear like in, I think, probably every episode. She's a little pug. You gotta forgive her. She's very, she's pretty insecure, So yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, what I was gonna say about on this episode is I had talked previously about kind of the origins of Deadly Class. And I was thinking about, there's a whole bunch of other stuff aside from just the beginnings of the series. I could talk about what happened afterwards. So we agreed to work on it. Actually, something I had mentioned in the kind of beginning stages of working on this thing is me and Rick, he gave me the email asking if I wanted to work on it. As I said, I was a big fan of his, so it was kind of like whatever he wants to work on, I was down for that. But we got on the phone and he kind of pitched me the idea. Excuse me. And it appealed to me right away, of course. I'm not like the level of violence in the series was occasionally tough to do, I guess, in a way. There's certain graphic violence and kind of gross humor and stuff that I didn't always love, but like the world itself, it was so tailor-made for me. I felt like we could really work really well together in this world. The thing that made it for me was just that, like, the way that Rick described it. He kind of grew up in this punk rock environment. And I had kind of a similar experience. My experience was more of hard to kind of explain, but I grew up in this kind of rockabilly scene. But really the rockabilly scene to a certain degree, when I was a kid, it's like looking into the origins of rock, this modern kind of version of rockabilly music and all this stuff. It's like it was an offshoot of punk, and there was a lot of punk rock in the stuff that we liked as kids. We loved the Clash and Social Distortion and the Smiths and kind of anything that had a certain amount of, you could see in their DNA that they had that kind of rockabilly influence. We would check it out. Me and my friends, we'd be into it. So it was, just like ska, and there's like a ska offshoot of punk, and there's like garage rock, which is more something that I would get more into as I got older. An offshoot of that's another offshoot of punk. So like there's these different schools, and but there's a lot of crossover between any of the schools. So he would talk to me about, he was living, as far as I remember, in Arizona when he was a kid, skate punk. I was not a skate punk, although a lot of the kids that I hung around with were skate punks. Pennywise, Lagwagon, all that kind of stuff. And that's what we kind of, me and Rick kind of met up on. That is slightly different worlds. He was in Arizona, I was up here in Montreal, up in Canada, but all the same punk bands came to Arizona, would eventually make their way up the States and make their way to Montreal and the other major Canadian cities. So we all, we saw a lot of the same shows, same concerts when we were kids. I don't even call them concerts because it was, like I said, very punk rock. So it was kind of like just shows. Like concerts, I think of as being these big venues and big things, whereas these punk shows would charge the least they could possibly charge at the door, and they were just small, sweaty clubs often. So it was an easy thing where Rick would talk about his experience growing up And I had so many of the same kind of touchstones between the punk side of things and also the love of comic books, which also made its way into our comic, into Deadly Class. We could see that we had so many common experiences. I think that it was going to be an easy thing, and also we're more or less the same age, so it's like he didn't have to explain to me anything about being, Gen X and growing up in that time, that pre-internet kind of time, the 80s, the 90s. I'm a bit, there's a slight age difference, whereas like I think of myself as being more of a 90s kid, whereas I think Rick is more of a late 80s, early 90s kid. Subtle difference, but if you're from that time, that it does make a little bit of a difference in your experience. But yeah, generally speaking, it's like same stuff that we both went through, a lot of similar stuff. So yeah, that was an easy yes for me. And then from there, it was like we went to the Image Expo, which is something Image used to have, where they would hype up. I wish they had these still, actually. I thought they were so exciting every year. As a fan, I was always looking forward to who are they going to steal from from Marvel or DC this year, and what new exciting book are they going to bring to Image. Image was really on a roll at that point. After the infamous Robert Kirkman manifesto had kind of helped change people's minds towards what they wanted to do with their comic career. Anyway, yeah, so I got to go do one of those Image Expos, got to stand on the stage after they introduced all of us and be interviewed. I was a complete unknown, but I think I made a relatively good impression. I got interviewed by Eric Larson, which was a trip, because when I was a kid, I was a big Image Comics fan, and I loved all the original Image Comics, Savage Dragon, etc. So that was wild. Yeah, we talked about that. And yeah, it did really well. Like the series did really well. It's a very, I find, to that sweet spot of both commercially and critically acclaimed, and commercially it did well too. So it's nice. I was able to pay down the debt of my condo and do stuff like that. When I first started, it was just me and my wife. Now it's me, my wife, and our 2 kids, and that helped pay the rent and help pay for the kids, pay for the diapers and all that stuff, as they say. So it changed my life in that way. Changed my life in a lot of ways. It was a lot of fun working with Rick. He's got a pretty different style than me in terms of the stuff that he likes, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of crossover, but then it's like, I guess just writing style, he writes in a very different way than I would. But it was fascinating to see his work, fascinating to see, he was such a guy that was able to think on the fly. I've said this a bunch of times, but I'm much more of a methodical kind of a thinker. I like to just take my time and really kind of let it stew and let it kind of, simmer in my brain before it actually turns into a real thing. Whereas I found Rick was able to, probably really good in a Hollywood writer's room, because he was able to think on his feet, come up with new ideas. And what I respected the most about his style was, if he felt like something, even though it's a monthly book where these things have to get done and they have to get out the door and printed and shipped and brought to the comic shop, he wouldn't be, if the story wasn't working, he was not afraid to throw it out, which is tough, in a monthly comic book setting. It's a lot easier to be like, you know what, this story is good enough for now. This is the best that I can do for now. I'll do better on the next one, and just think of it that way. Whereas if things weren't working, I'm sure that's happened to him before too, where he just goes, this is good enough. But generally speaking, I've definitely been talking with him where it's like, we got to change this. It's just not a strong enough ending, or it's not a strong enough this or that. Yeah, I've always had a lot of respect for that, because it's probably pretty rare where you have that much dedication to it, where you gotta you gotta get it right, and deadlines be damned, really. It's just gotta be, you gotta feel good about it at the end of the day. It's your work going out the door, so you gotta put all your effort into it. Always had respect for that. So yeah, there's that aspect. Then, a few years later, it got turned into a TV show. That was one of those things where none of us, especially me, I think, I don't know, maybe Rick too, but I didn't believe, it was like, I'm not going to believe this is a real thing. Because like almost every comic is in some form of, they're in Hollywood in some way where it's like people think their comic's going to get turned into a TV show or a movie, but it's extremely rare that that actually happens. Like extremely, extremely rare where it actually even super mega successful comic books can still just like linger in development hell, as they call it, and never actually get produced, or they can just be there for decades or whatever. Nothing will happen there. So I was just like, yeah. There's like people interested, but we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see the TV show on my screen and the check is in my bank account. But yeah, it ended up like happening, and I got to see some of the. I wasn't directly involved in the creation. Rick was definitely very, very hands-on with the creation of the TV show, and it was cool. He would send me stuff to look at, different actors, their tryouts and stuff. I remember the actor who Luke Tenney, who is now on a show with Harrison Ford, the TV show. The name escapes me for a second, but I remember he impressed everybody with his rendition of the character Willie. We got a bunch of great actors, to play these different roles. Really, like some of their big breakout, like they would break out in other things sometimes, some of these actors, and it's been really cool to see them doing their thing. Like the actress who played Maria, she's now in the Superman movie. Very cool to see that kind of happen for her, because she was super nice when I met her. And yeah, that was a trip, man. I worked as a storyboard artist on the episode where they're tripping out in Las Vegas. I worked as basically a character designer for the little animated sequences that would be in each episode. When things were going a little bit off model from my drawings, I would try to help bring it back closer to what we were going for. I got to go. It was filmed in Vancouver, and me and my wife, and at the time my 1-year-old son, got to go to Vancouver and see it get filmed and meet all the actors and stuff like that. Me, Rick, a bunch of the actors, most of them, we did a premiere in New York City, like as part of New York Comic Con. We had the premiere at a movie theater. That was possibly the coolest part of the whole experience, I think, is we were in this green room before, and it felt very fancy, very hoity-toity, but kind of cool to experience that one time in your life also, and get to see our first episode on big screen like it was a movie with all these adoring fans. It was very cool. I walked out of there, and like there were people lined up to get autographs, and you would assume it would just be the actors, but they also they called my name and like felt like I was in like a boy band for a second. I was out there like signing autographs. It was like probably the most weird experience of my life, but it was it was cool. Like I wouldn't want to do it. Wouldn't want to do it again, really. I think that would be a weird way to lead your life. But I thought it was cool just to do it like one time, just to see what that was like. So yeah, that was very cool. It only got one season. A lot of people are very bummed out about that, but it is what it is. We have no real control over that kind of thing. Maybe we'll see it again one day in some other form. But those actors and all the people that helped make that happen, they're off doing their own other things now. So I wish them all the best of luck. That's the thing. I was like explaining to people at conventions, like, do you think they'll ever be able to get that group back together? And it's like, well, they're like an army. It's like assembling an army, and the army has broken up and gone to fight different wars, and they're off doing different things now. And it's like it would be almost impossible to kind of bring all these people back together. Maybe at the beginning when it had just gotten canceled, there was obviously a possibility of a Netflix or some other streaming service to pick it up, but now it seems unlikely. But again, the possibility of it coming back in some other form is that's always, that could be a thing. You never really know, and these things become impossible, and then all of a sudden somebody has an interest, and all of a sudden it becomes more of a real thing once again. And again, I won't get my hopes up, but like there have been some talks about things like that, so we'll see. But again, like the initial TV show, I won't really believe it until I see it. But it was, you know, regardless of whether more gets done with that, it was an amazing experience. I think, you know, it worked Rick to the bone. I think that was one thing that it was pretty rough. I think Rick worked on that series so hard and still tried to keep all his comic books coming out. I think it, you know, it almost killed him. So I don't know if he wants to do that again or not. But yeah, he wanted to see it a certain way. It was his baby, and so he had to do it right. You know, he had to make sure that it was as close to his vision as possible. So again, respect for that for sure. That's the TV stuff about Deadly Class. Maybe in the next video I'll talk about the next stage of it, which was pretty much, you know, the pandemic and just wrapping the whole thing up and how that felt. Yeah. That's the next video. So, Thunderhead, Superheroes on Acid. That's all you really need to know about it. It's me and Kevin Castanero making some comic book magic, and it is on Kickstarter starting in at the end of July and going all the way through August. So we've got just amazing art, some amazing covers from the my buds at Lethal Comic Books, Carl Kerschel, Andy Belanger. I'm doing a cover, Kevin's doing a cover. I am doing flashback. I'm writing the series and doing some flashback stuff. Kevin is doing the bulk of the amazing artwork that you got to check out. With every issue, like with every issue, there will be, what do we got? We got a free sketchbook, we got a free poster, free stickers, along with the actual oversized comic book that you'll get. So yeah, on Kickstarter, check it out. Thanks for listening.